Grace and peace, everybody. We're in part 2 of this series on understanding the contrast between not being ashamed or being shameless. Why we want to not be ashamed but not be shameless. The shameless mind is the result or the product of sin. But before we unpack that, let's start at the seed. And to help us understand the seed of sin, we're going to look at a very real prophecy. The word of God spoken against a particular people and their attitude, which led to them to have a certain way of living, a certain way of acting. Literally, even living naked with no clothes. In the book of Isaiah is where we go. Isaiah chapter 47, the prophet is speaking here a word against a particular people. Before we say who they are, let's look at what they were doing. He says in verse 3, "Thy nakedness shall be uncovered. Yea, thy shame shall be seen. I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man." The Lord is promising to expose or to reveal this life. The Lord is saying, I'm going to show the world who and how you truly are. Who is he talking about? He's talking about the literal kingdom of Babylon. When we read there in verse number 1 through 2, of this kingdom, he says, "Come down and sit in the dust, O daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Uncover thy locks. Make bare the leg. Uncover the thigh. Pass over the rivers." Now this is the attitude and the atmosphere and the action of Babylon as opposed to God's ideal of not being ashamed like Adam and Eve were in the garden. They are bearing themselves, they're bearing their souls because they have sold out. Not just S-O-L-D, but S-O-U-L-E-D. Babylon has this attitude that manifests in these actions that are very much similar to all of us when we decide to live on our own code or by our own will. When James speaks about how the devil tempts us to do what we actually ourselves want to do in our natural state, look at how he describes the process. He says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempted he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death." It's an analogy that really compares to what we see in the natural world. When we see how you have a seed of any kind of fruit, right? You have a seed, but then that seed will grow up. And the thing about it, when it grows up into a tree or a bush or whatever, it'll bear flower. And then not long after that flower will give rise to fruit. So you've got seed, flower, and then the fruit. Here in James, what he's telling us is that, what happens is we make a decision based on what the devil can deceive us or can entice us to do, to lead us into sin. That seed of sin, talking about the sin that we do, that sin then will bear a flower. And one of the flowers of sin is guilt. We feel bad when we have a desire to do what is right, but then we've done what's wrong. And what that guilt then, that flower of guilt, that's not the end game of the enemy. The end game of the enemy is to get some fruit. And that fruit from that guilt is actually shame. It's built into the process to where when we have done wrong, we've gone against God's will or we've gone our own way, we not only feel bad or guilty, but we actually have a shame. We want to hide ourselves. We want to hide our sin. That's why when Adam and Eve did what they did in chapter 3 and they ran from God, what did they do? They ran and they hid themselves. Sin, guilt, leading to shame. But this is where Babylon has surpassed. They had gone beyond this point. They had gone beyond that point of God not just feeling bad about what they've done and not just feeling shame, but because of their refusal to accept the Redeemer, they got to a place where they were actually no longer feeling shame. They said, we're going to show what we're doing. I'm not going to hide what I'm doing. I'm going to exalt what I'm doing. We're going to stop here for a moment and look at not just Isaiah's proclamation on Babylon, but as Isaiah and as Jeremiah and Ezekiel all show us where they went wrong so we can go right.